In this episode of IES Sports Science, we investigate the unusual tactics of young American golfer Bryson DeChambeau. His integration of technology into the sport of golf is unlike anything that has ever been seen before and could very well revolutionize the game as we know it. To begin, we looked into DeChambeau's background and how he used it to derive his unique style. A former physics major and member of the golf team at Southern Methodist University in Dallas, Texas, his coach recommended that he read a golf instructional book titled The Golfing Machine. This novel, an incredibly dense, physics and geometry-based read, perfectly matched up with both DeChambeau's academic and personal interests, providing him with a lot of logical, relatable insight into the game that he loves. One particular theory that he derived from this novel is called the zero-shift, zero-plane swing. Here he is to explain.
I started back in 2011. I read this book called The Golfing Machine that my coach, Mike Shy, had thrown at me. And he said, hey, if you want to get better at golf, if you want to learn the golf swing for yourself, read this book. And so I read this book, and through this process, this journey of learning different ins and outs of that book, I came across this motion called the zero shifting motion. It's in chapter 10, section 7, is component 7, and it was the first variation A, and it was called zero shifting. And what that pretty much means is I'm on a single plane. It's called the zero shifting motion for that reason. There's no shift in the plane. So I essentially started to swing on one plane. And when I did that with a wedge, and then I did it with a 3-iron. And I soon realized that that wasn't going to work because I was having to change my body posture based upon those angles. And it didn't make sense. I said, there's no way I can do this. And I kept thinking to myself, well, this has to be the way. There has to be a way to do it. And I said to myself, well, why don't we make them all the same length? Let's try that. I asked that to my coach, Mike Shy, and he said, that's an easy question to ask. That's a very difficult one to answer. And so that started us on this journey of trying to use this single length set. And we took an old Nike. It was originally a Henry Griffith set that was all mangled and mashed up and didn't have the head weights all right, but it was really close. And we said, all right, let's take heads and make them exactly the way we want, and then we can build it from there. Because essentially all the head weights have to be the same head weight. They all have to be 278 grams, which is pretty much a 7-iron head for me. So we did that. We got the pitching wedge ground down to 278. We got the 3-iron lead taped up to 278. Made everything the same length. And we said, all right. And it took us about 2 weeks to do it. Went to this old golf shop, Roger Dunn's, but went to the golf course after we built them. Went on the first hole, had an 8-iron in, 160 yards out. Said, it's going to be relatively close to 7-iron. Shouldn't affect it too much. Hit it, didn't go 170 yards and went 160. I went, okay, there's some progress there. Let's go to the next hole. So I went to the next hole and had 210 yards in. Never forget this. I pulled out a 5-iron. I said, this is the moment of truth. Went and struck it, and it seemed like eternity that golf ball was in the air. And I'm like, wow, that's not going 170 yards. It's definitely going further than that. And sure enough, it landed right next to the hole and rolled out a little bit. But I said to Mike, I said, this could potentially change the game.
What's incredibly interesting about this theory is that it only works with clubs that are the same length. As he pointed out in the video, the zero-shift swing is impossible without having these even-sized clubs, since your body has to be shifted from iron to iron with the traditional set. Upon having these clubs crafted, DeChambeau found incredible success on both the collegiate and amateur golf scenes. In 2015, he became just the 5th person in history to win both the NCAA Division I Collegiate Golf Tournament and the U.S. Amateur Cup in the same year. In 2016, he had strong performances at both the Masters and the U.S. Open, and there's growing anticipation for his success in the future. To dive more into The Golfing Machine, written by Homer Kelly, a fascinating note is that it was written in 1982, 35 years ago from today. This book existed before Tiger Woods had touched the PGA Tour, and before golf technology was advancing at an exponential pace. Which ultimately begs 2 questions. First, why did this theory, this physics geometry-based idea, never catch on? And second, why does DeChambeau put so much faith into a book that has never bred success in the past? With the first question, simply listening to DeChambeau speak about the book answers just about everything you need to know. It's not really easy to understand what he's talking about, and it's clear that the novel is incredibly dense, mathematics-based, and not something that the general person or casual golfer can understand. Along with that, his swing is not easily fixed by an eye test or saying, keep your head down, general tricks that are used to fix a golf swing. Kelly uses challenging theories that are only understood by quantitative minds such as DeChambeau's, and most golfers, even if they can understand it, don't want to spend the time to understand it and prefer to stick with the traditional model. As per why DeChambeau put so much faith in the book, we go back to him to provide more information.
What most people don't understand about the book is that they think it's this one way, it's a method, and it's not. It's actually a system. It describes any motion among any plane out there. I can literally go to everybody's golf swing on the driving range and say, hey, look, and describe their exact motion through that book. It's not a method, it's a system. And that's the beauty of it. And people didn't get into that. They just saw one little aspect of the book and took it and said, this is the way to do it. You know, you have the Ben Doyleites who swung like Bobby Clampett, you know, who had a lot of lag and stuff like that. And that's the only way he taught, which is unfortunate because that book was written to encompass everybody in the game of golf. And I wish that I could bring that more to light, and I will eventually, along with Mike Shy, my coach, and a few others. But coming back down to it, it comes down to your body type and what you can do, and that's what the book really is about. So it's going to stand the test of time. It's not going to waver. It can't. It's just what it is. You know, it's like giving us a physics book. It is what it is, right? There's laws that govern all the ways of nature. So it's going to stand the test of time. No, it's a system. It's a system, exactly.
His emphasis on the systematic procedure of the swing and not finding a one pure truth is quite interesting. While he seems to have a lot of faith in this systematic thinking, the amount of math and modeling involved in the swing lends to the thought train that there should be one true swing that meets all of the theoretical criteria outlined in the book. But in reality, DeChambeau seems to understand that theory does not relate directly to practice, and not everything is going to work for everyone, regardless of context or scenario. He makes it clear that his theory is uniquely working for him, and it might not be successful for everyone, but that these are tips that should generally be followed. The next important thing to note about his clubs is his driver. Unlike most golfers on the PGA Tour, DeChambeau utilizes two different drivers when he's on the course, depending on what he wants to occur. And here he is to provide some insight into why he does that.
Well, I've been able to practice two motions. I practice what I call my fairway finder driver, and it's swung about 113 miles an hour, and that's similar to everything else that I do in regards to my iron play and even 3-wood play and hybrid play. But then I also have another gear called a crank driver, and I can pretty much increase my mile per hour by 12 to 13 miles per hour if I want to. So it goes probably 20 to 30 yards further, depending on the conditions, obviously. And sometimes it doesn't go even as far as my fairway finder, just because of the trajectory and the way the wind's coming into me. So that's just something I've got to decide on the golf course. But usually if it's downwind, it goes a lot further. And I pretty much put it in the fingers of my hands, and I widen my stance, have a lot of weight shift, a lot of lag, makes the club head go a little faster. Puts a little bit more toll on my body, that's why I don't use it always. But again, it's useful in certain situations.
It's quite interesting that he uses two different motions here. First, the fairway finder, as he likes to call it, which follows everything else that he stands by, and it's not really surprising. On the other hand, what he refers to as the crank driver, which is essentially him swinging the club as hard as he can, doesn't follow the standard benchmarks that he uses in his own game. It's more comparable to that of Bubba Watson, who hits the ball as hard as he can, regardless of whether it's going to slice or hook. And most golfers seem to lead towards that mindset when they're driving, but with DeChambeau having such a counterculture mindset, it's surprising to see that he integrates it into his golf game and his bag. Another interesting technological insight that came up when DeChambeau was doing more work into investigating his different clubs was the way he changed the grips. When switching to the single-length club, he found that he was having wrist issues and needed to change the way the club was sitting in his hand to have the most success. And here he is to elaborate.
Right as we were changing over to more of an upright swing, I realized that I couldn't hold it in my fingers anymore because it was messing up my wrist. It was starting to bow my wrist. So right about that same time, we start putting the big grips on, and I was still holding the fingers, but I realized slightly over time that, oh, I can put it into my palm, just like a big putter grip. You put it in your lifeline. And I realized that, and I started putting it in the lifeline. I said, okay, this is relaxing my wrist, and I can still hit it quite easily.
It's quite fascinating to see how he used the thought of a bigger putter grip on his other clubs to replicate the same feeling of his other swings. He really continued to build on the thought process of a single plane and moving it past just the iron play. This has really helped him in both his collegiate and amateur play, and it should help him in the future as well. But the question is, has DeChambeau gone too far? At the beginning of the 2017 season, he began to putt side saddle, as noted by the video here. He putted reasonably well throughout that weekend, and said he only expected to improve on it. But sadly, there was immense backlash from the PGA Tour, and they found that DeChambeau was too unorthodox, claiming that his putter was illegal due to it being center shafted, meaning that it was balanced on the center of the club and not one side like a normal putter. While this was simply an equipment violation, there could be in the future a note that side saddle putting will be illegal, similar to how anchor putting was outlawed a few years ago. And lastly, DeChambeau has played relatively poor this year, which has led to him getting a lot of backlash on the internet and television. A lot of people are finding fault with the way he plays and are annoyed with the amount of attention he receives given that he's been playing horrendously during the current season. But whether he's able to find more success or not in the future remains to be seen, and the technological innovations used by him are sure to impact the game of golf for the years to come. This has been Kevin Gay with IES Sports Science.
The game of golf is about having fun, and a lot of people are quitting the game of golf because it's too hard, too long, and it's too tough. One thing that I've tried to do is make the game a little bit easier, is keep the same length, right? And in order to keep the same length, you're keeping your same body posture and everything. So think about it for the beginners of the game of golf. When you initially try and hit a golf ball, you're hitting what, an 8-iron, 9-iron, something that's a little more loft, a little shorter iron, more comfortable. As you get to the 3-iron, those beginners can't hit those 3-irons. It's too difficult. It takes time for them to adapt and understand how to hit a 3-iron. But I think with a single length set, that could change the game.